It's been said that Katharine Hepburn was the boldest rebel Hollywood ever produced, a woman whose convictions were as steely as her trademark cheekbones and whose private life was wilder than any movie script. All these decades later, gossip still circles her name. Did she really carry on a secret romance with a married director right under everyone's noses? Were the rumors about her orientation simply a product of her swaggering style, or was there some hidden truth behind the whispers? Buckle up. This story is a roller coaster of scandal, heartbreak, and shocking twists that go far beyond the screen roles that made her a legend. Progressive roots and an early taste for rebellion. Before the spotlight and the scandals, Katharine was shaped by two parents who refused to blend into the background of early 20th century America. Her mother, Katharine Martha Houghton, was a pioneering activist in the women's suffrage movement, notorious for rattling polite society by taking her daughter to protests. Instead of wagging a finger at her tomboy behavior, her parents encouraged young Katharine to embrace it. She took the name Jimmy, chopped her hair to match the boys, and played sports with a fearless energy that would define her entire life. Yet, even this open-minded upbringing was mild compared to the controversies she'd later face. If there was one message her parents ingrained in her, it was, never pretend to be someone you aren't. It was a lesson she took to heart. Throughout her formative years, she reveled in testing limits, especially the boundaries of what was considered proper for a young lady. Though the neighborhood chatter could be scathing, her parents stood by her unconditionally. But just when it seemed like Katharine's life would continue on this buoyant path, one devastating event changed everything. The rebellious spark in her eyes would dim, and the once carefree girl would have to reckon with unimaginable grief, a tragic loss, and the family's shocking denial. Katharine was closest to her older brother Tom. He was only a couple of years her senior, and they shared an almost mischievous sense of humor. They teased each other, confided their biggest dreams, and trusted one another without question. But during an Easter break trip to New York, everything shifted in a single morning. Katharine awoke to the horrifying discovery that her beloved brother had ended his life. To this day, the exact reasons remain uncertain, and she was left reeling from the tragedy. In her shocked state, one detail froze her heart. Her family staunchly refused to admit Tom had offed himself. They clung to the idea it was an accident or some bizarre misadventure. This wall of denial haunted Katharine more than any blunt acknowledgement could have. It stifled her grieving process, leaving her anxious and distrustful in an already harsh world. Nothing about life felt stable anymore. She plunged into introspection, questioning everything, including her own identity. Some wondered if her tomboy ways were just a refusal to face a world that felt too cruelly unpredictable. Either way, the rebellious spark in Katharine was set on a collision course with an entertainment industry that didn't know what to do with a woman who refused to mold herself to standard expectations. Missteps, ambition, and the taste of the stage. When Katharine enrolled in Bryn Mawr College, the stage beckoned her like a siren call. She wasn't interested in pleasing classmates at formal dinners or joining typical sorority life. She wanted thrills. She'd slip away from curated social events and break rules left and right, once even going so far as to bathe, naked of course, in the Closter Pond, earning shocked gasps from her more conventional classmates. Her father, a respectable doctor, remained skeptical of her theatrical aspirations. For him, acting was synonymous with financial instability. But Katharine would not be deterred. Soon enough, she joined the college drama group, nabbing a lead role that demanded she cross-dress on stage. She loved the sensation of slipping into male costumes, which stirred up more than a bit of chatter from the staff and student body. This was also the time she embarked on a romance with Ludlow Ogden Smith, a kind and well-heeled young man who was equally fascinated and bewildered by her. They got married, but even within weeks, she sensed she was stifling her true self. Her heart belonged to the stage, and she had no intention of burying her ambition in the routine of domestic life. Reality, however, didn't soften just because she was determined. Her initial forays into professional theater were marred by scathing reviews and multiple firings. One time, after being hired as an understudy, she was unceremoniously forced to go on stage for the lead role, only to trip over her own feet and flub half her lines. Mortified, she was fired with brutal directness. Yet behind that mortification smoldered a fire. She refused to surrender. If one door closed, she hunted for another, convinced her big break was just around the corner. Ironically, it was. A Broadway play called The Warrior's Husband finally showed a version of Katharine that critics couldn't ignore. Fierce, authoritative, and charismatic. Among the entranced audience members sat a talent scout for RKO Pictures. In a flash, Katharine found herself whisked to Hollywood for a screen test, demanding a salary that made the studio heads gasp. They gambled on her, and the gamble paid off in spades. Rising star and brewing controversy, enter John Ford. Her film debut, A Bill of Divorcement, caused a sensation. Critics raved about her confidence, unusual speech patterns, and luminous presence. By 1934, she had an Oscar in hand for Morning Glory. Her star soared as if by magic, but that charmed ascent came hand in hand with scrutiny. Why didn't she conform to the usual starlet persona, malleable, giggly, and demure? Instead, she wore trousers, favored a short, sharp hairstyle, and showed little patience for the press. That impatience led her right into a storm of gossip. Journalists pegged her as Katharine of Arrogance, while fans adored her rebellious streak. As always, controversy swirled around her personal life. Freshly divorced from Ludlow, she sparked curiosity by linking herself to the powerful Hollywood agent Leland Hayward, who was himself still married at the time. Right on the heels of that scandal, rumors sprouted about a closeness with director John Ford, who happened to have a wife and child. On the set of Mary of Scotland, Ford was utterly captivated by Katharine's unflinching manner and refusal to cater to anyone's expectations. He's said to have told friends she was unlike any woman he'd met, a free spirit who blazed new trails. Before the final scenes wrapped, the two became inseparable on set. Hollywood whispered that Ford was on the brink of leaving his wife for her. Yet he faced an ultimatum from home. If he sought a divorce, he'd lose custody of his beloved daughter. The rumors that Katharine even offered to pay a hefty sum to Ford's wife in exchange for his freedom-fed tabloid flames. True or not, it painted a picture of an actress determined to carve out her own happiness, whatever the cost. But for all her bravado, she found she couldn't save a man bent on self-destruction. Ford's drinking spiraled, culminating in delirious nights that left Katharine terrified she'd see him destroy himself. She'd forcibly nurse him with bizarre home remedies, but realized she was in over her head. Meanwhile, Her other paramour, Leland Hayward, was fuming. After all, they'd each gotten divorces. Wasn't she supposed to marry him now? In classic Hepburn style, she refused, and in a petty move, Hayward allegedly kept her from roles that could have boosted her standing. By 1936, after several box office failures, her star threatened to plummet. The Great Comeback and the Howard Hughes interlude. Hollywood can be fickle. You're worshipped one minute, deemed box office poison the next. Katharine learned that lesson the hard way after a string of disappointments. The press had turned on her. The public wasn't so sure about her. She slipped back into the theater, a safe haven where audiences still marveled at her commanding aura. Touring in the Philadelphia Story changed her destiny again. A success on stage, it caught the attention of big league studios. And thanks to a stroke of generosity from her then-beau, wealthy magnate Howard Hughes, she personally owned the film rights. Howard Hughes was an enigmatic figure, an aviator who broke world records and an entrepreneur whose pockets ran deeper than any ocean. When he first met Katharine, he was dazzled by her independence and those fierce eyes that challenged him at every turn. Dinner dates on yachts gave way to spontaneous flights across the country, high adventure fit for two unstoppable personalities. Yet for all the fun, their relationship was riddled with tension. He proposed marriage, but she hesitated. She wanted him to meet her family in Fenwick, Connecticut, convinced that if he truly understood her roots, he might prove his compatibility. By the end of that trip, it was obvious that neither her family nor the small-town vibe thrilled Hughes. He left, and so did her hopes of forging a life with him. Undeterred, she turned her focus back to Hollywood. She sold the rights to the Philadelphia Story to MGM, but stipulated she star in it, and handpicked the rest of the cast. With Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart by her side, the film soared, smashing box office records and returning Katharine to the A-list. She had engineered one of Hollywood's most successful comebacks, proving that behind the tough exterior, there was a strategic mastermind who knew how to wield power in an industry notoriously unkind to women. Spencer Tracy, the love that couldn't be. Just when Katharine was coasting on her revived success, fate introduced her to Spencer Tracy on the set of Woman of the Year. He was her opposite in many ways, reserved, devoutly Catholic, and deeply prone to bouts of self-doubt. She was boisterous, openly atheist, and seemingly unshakable. Yet sparks flew from the moment they locked eyes. Their on-screen chemistry lit up the film, enchanting audiences worldwide. Before long, the name Tracy and Hepburn became synonymous with comedic brilliance and heartfelt romance. On camera, at least. Off camera, it wasn't a simple love story. Tracy was married. His Catholic guilt over the arrangement gnawed at him constantly. Even though he lived separately from his wife and children, the idea of divorce was out of the question. Katharine never pressed him to leave. She took him as he was, heartbreak and all, funneling her unstoppable energy into caring for him through his insomnia, drinking bouts, and crushing depression. She once called him tortured, and for decades she tried to be his anchor, despite the fact that their relationship remained a well-known secret in Hollywood and an open secret among insiders. This scenario only fueled more speculation. Some said the relationship was a smokescreen for Katharine's rumored preference for women, an arrangement that might have benefited Spencer if he was quietly grappling with his own orientation. Others maintained that they were soulmates forced to keep their love under wraps because of outdated morality clauses in their contracts, and the powerful grip of the Catholic Church on Tracy's conscience. Whatever the absolute truth, the two were inseparable. They went on to make 9 films together, culminating in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Tragically, just 17 days after filming Wrapped, Spencer Tracy passed away. Katharine, ever discreet, did not attend his funeral out of respect for his family, waiting until decades later, after Tracy's wife died, to finally speak openly about what he'd meant to her. Defiance, evolution, and the John Ford reunion. In losing Spencer Tracy, Katharine lost the person who was arguably her closest companion. But even that enormous heartbreak didn't halt her forward momentum. Her next major role came in The Lion in Winter, showcasing her as the formidable Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. She won her 3rd Oscar, though she famously never attended the ceremonies. Those who thought an aging actress would fade away were proved sorely wrong. Off-screen, she grew more comfortable sharing pieces of herself. She stirred political waters by openly supporting birth control and abortion rights. She declared her atheism, unafraid of the potential backlash in a faith-leaning Hollywood. Yet, for all her outspokenness, she retained an aura of mystery. That mystique grew when, in the early 1970s, she reunited briefly with John Ford. Ford's grandson was writing a book about him, so he brought Hepburn to see the ailing director. Their final recorded conversation, caught on tape by accident, included Ford telling her he loved her, and Katharine replying that the feeling was mutual. Though details remain murky, it was enough for fans and historians to question whether those old rumors of a more than friendly relationship were rooted in reality. Most men in her life passed on before she did. Somehow, she remained, an indomitable figure stubbornly refusing to yield to time. While others slowed down, she kept up her tennis games well into her 80s and even indulged in painting. Yet, a final reckoning was inevitable, and for Katharine, it came in the form of repeated health scares. Hospitalizations for pneumonia ravaged her strength. Her famously sharp mind began to dim with age, and she gradually withdrew from public life. Final revelations and an enduring legacy. One last twist in her life story emerged when she published her autobiography, Me, Stories of My Life, and confessed that she had lied about her birth date for years, aligning it with her late brother Tom's birthday, an emotional tribute to the sibling she lost so young. That small detail reflected a lifetime of controlling her narrative, of compartmentalizing tragedy to maintain her stride. In 2003, at 96 years old, Katharine Hepburn left this world in the place she cherished the most, her family home in Fenwick, Connecticut. By that point, she had become an icon who redefined what it meant to be a Hollywood leading lady. She gave zero apologies for her choices, whether it was wearing men's trousers, loving who she wanted to love, or fueling controversies that modern fans still debate. Her story remains a tapestry woven from ambition, passion, secrets, and fearless authenticity. The fact that people still debate every detail, from her rumored flings to her possible hidden orientation, shows how effectively she guarded her privacy while dazzling the world with her presence. Every piece of speculation ultimately returns to the same question: who was Katharine Hepburn, really? If you enjoyed exploring the gripping chapters of Katharine Hepburn's life, there's a wealth of untold stories waiting just beneath the surface. From unconventional childhood to clandestine affairs and unstoppable ambition, she lit a path that still challenges modern notions of femininity and independence. And perhaps that's the greatest secret of all. Even now, we're still uncovering the full depth of who she was, and in the process, learning something about ourselves.